For those of you that are new with us for session 4, just give you a very quick recap on where what we've covered so far. We've done information takeoffs, we've done classifications. Today we are focusing in on model checking, and the first session was just a sort of an introductory session with the workflow of Solibri through and through. But today we're going to be talking about model checking. So as I said a minute ago, I'm accompanied by my colleague Ken here, who's going to get into a demonstration, and we're going to spend a little bit more time in the software today than we are in presentation. So this will take about maybe 5-6 minutes to work our way through this, and then we'll be in the software for the rest of the session. At the end of the session, we're obviously going to have a Q&A like we normally do, but if you do have any questions or if you want to put anything in the chat window, then please feel free to do so, because we'll get to those at the end. And if there's anything that you'd like to take offline with us, then we're more than happy to follow up and have a conversation with you about what you see after the session too. So the little question window should be found in your little go-to box, somewhere on the right-hand side of the screen or at the bottom. So as I've said, Ken and I, we've been doing these sessions so far. We've actually got 2 more after this one, so including today, 3. The next session I'll get into details on a little bit later, but the last session is going to be on the 1st of July, and that we are intending to cover the subject of Kobe in that session. So feel free to watch out for that one, as well as these 2 sessions that are in the meantime talking about model checking. And we are still planning activity moving through the summer as well, up until school time again in September. So we're going to be thinking about what we want to do and what you want to see in September time, but look out for more content from us that's going to happen throughout the summer. So I'll be in touch with everybody that's been a part of these webinars as well. So model checking, we'll do an introduction. I'm going to review some of your recent feedback as well. We're going to showcase just the typical workflow demonstration, again, focusing on what checking is and where that lies in the process. Ken's going to then dive into what model checking is within the Solibri Office environment, and then we'll talk about what's happening next, and then a Q&A session at the end. So introducing you to model checking, I'm just going to move this window off my screen. You can't see it, but it's there, just so I can see the full presentation. Here we go. So we've spoken about the combination of IFCs, the federation of the IFCs that we have, whether you're working in different disciplines, whether you're just walking through the models, whether you're experiencing what IFC is in 3D or in sort of a data-driven environment. We then moved on to how to enrich the models that we're working with by using tools like classifications within Solibri, and that was in the previous session. All of these sessions, by the way, can be found in the recording on YouTube in the playlist. So that will be shared with you all as well. And hopefully you've seen the sessions up to this point, but don't worry if you haven't, because you can always go back over them. But today we're talking about model checking. So we're talking about all of the rule sets that come out of the software, whether you're visually checking for things, whether you're reporting and using information takeoffs for design verification and validation, then there's lots of different ways in which you can define model checking. And today, we're going to showcase what that means in the Solibri environment, whether you're looking at a series of rules that have been tailored or changed or customized in your own environment based on maybe the roles that you have defined. If you've got any questions on that sort of stuff, just feel free to ask away. But we'll then move on soon enough to what information takeoffs mean, especially when we're talking about things like Kobe and how that uses these tools. So just getting into a little bit more detail on that. So obviously, as I've said already, the process of physically checking models within Solibri can be done a number of ways, and I've already mentioned those, whether it's visually, searching for things, reporting, or using our rule sets. Today, we're going to focus really on the rule sets and how they work and the workflow behind them, because we did a poll at the end of the last session, and the general consensus was that today's session should really be just an introductory workflow, and we can get into a little bit of detail on certain things, but we'll try and capture as much as we can. Again, using Solibri, much faster, much more reliable way of checking for building standards, and just making sure that we are, meeting our own company practices, and whether it's, building regulations sort of checks, egress analysis sort of checks, and fire stopping, or moving into the realm of what clash detection is. We'll try and talk about as many things as we can today. So we're not just talking about geometry in clash detection, we are talking about how Solibri encapsulates both the data and the geometry. And again, finding issues in the model environment, of course it's going to be cheaper if you find them earlier on. The later that they get, the more expensive they typically get, and naturally the worst case is for them to end up on site. And another thing to mention is you can't really say that you're getting into BIM unless you're really taking in the validation and the verification of what I means to BIM, which is the information. So we'll get into a little bit of detail on that too. All sessions are going to be recorded and they'll all be shared again to you via YouTube playlist that we've got running. And again, just a little bit of housekeeping, just ask questions as we work our way through. So the survey feedback, and I won't spend too much time on this because I show this every week, but it's changed a little bit, and we've done information takeoffs and classifications. Today we're working on model checking. There's still a series of other things that you said you wanted us to showcase to you, and we're not going to lose sight of that. So defining rule requirements, model comparison, and how to report issues is something that we're going to focus in on probably in the next session. Then we'll get into the likes of Cobia and information takeoffs after that. So all of these other areas that you've mentioned, whether it's federating models or exporting to IFC, we're not losing sight of those, and we will come back to them, that's for sure. So in terms of our training courses, this was another poll that went out just to say, is there any sort of need out there for more in-depth training? And the general consensus was yes, there is. And so we've got courses that are still coming up in Q3. We've got fundamentals in July, and we've got advanced courses in August, and there's still spaces for those. So if you want to join in, just drop me an email or message me at the end of this, and I'll be more than happy to facilitate any requirements. I'm highlighting as we work our way through the webinars what aspects of these webinars are incorporated into the training. So if this is an introductory or a teaser for you, then the training will get you certified and fully aware of what that functionality does. So just the workflow again, and we're just going to highlight this each week. I'm not going to go through it each week because it takes a little bit of time, and I think it'd rather show you what the software can do. But this is the sort of nutshell of Solibri, and today we're really focusing in on the checking aspect. So defining the checking, the rule sets, how do we identify them, and how we make a decision on what we're looking at really, and how we base the severity of the issues through this traffic light system, which you see of this red, amber, and green triangle. So that's everything from me for the time being. We'll come back to my presentation a little bit later, but for now, I'll pass over to my colleague Ken, and he will do the rest. Are you there, Ken?
Okay. I was going to stay quiet there just to see or hear the panic. But, do you want to switch the screen over?
Yes, I'll do that now.
Perfect.
Actually, I'm changing it to the wrong Ken.
Polls, or I don't change it to the other Ken. He's not here.
Yeah,
two Kens on the call. I'm in as a viewer as well as a presenter. So
no worries. I think I've got the right one here. We'll come back to the poll a little bit later. Definitely.
Okay, cool. Right. So you can now see my machine. Using Windows today just because. We can use Windows or Mac. In the background, I do actually have Mac OS sitting back here, but we're running inside Windows today. And because we're focusing on the checking process, I'm using a model that's a little bit of a Blue Peter special, for those of you old enough to know what Blue Peter is, but this is one that I made earlier. And it really just consists of a previously federated model that has the structural, the architectural, and the ventilation model pulled together with our good old Solibri building that you all know and love and are so familiar with. So all of this sort of good stuff is actually in here behind the scenes. Quickly, before I go into anything else, and before I forget, I left this screen on in the file layout in settings, and what I want to do is just make sure, and the same for everybody else, make sure that you have your checking options, all of them enabled, for a very good reason that will become apparent in a few minutes' time. So we want all of these turned on. By default, when you first install Solibri, it will only be the rule name and the issue description that appear in that list activated, but we want everything switched on, and as I say, the reason will become obvious later. So I've already got the model. I've already done the usual checks to make sure it's aligned and all the sort of pre-checking side of things. And what we're going on to look at now is the checking process itself. So the other thing that was set in the background before we get to this stage is the role. So that's previously been set as BIM validation architectural. So we've talked about this briefly before, but if I return again to File and roles. This is the role that's loaded. It's one of our example roles. There's a whole bunch. If you go to open, there's a whole bunch of them sitting in here. Those are in the samples folder, which on Windows is in C users public Solibri roles. On macOS, it's just application Solibri roles. So easy enough to find. But what these do is predefine what rule sets, classifications, and information takeoffs are going to be presented to the user when they first go to start checking. So in the rule sets, which is what we're looking at today, we have 3 gold stars that show BIM validation architectural, general space check, and intersections between architectural components. Those are set, but in the background, we've got 3 others that end users can bring in. We've not gone into end users, super users, any of that stuff yet. I'll show you briefly what that does in just a second. But BIM validation architectural, general space check, intersections between architectural components means when I go to checking, those same 3 rule sets are already in this list. And when we come in here, we have a whole bunch of different views to look at. We've got the 3D view, obviously, because that's how we can identify and work out what the issues are. But to start with, when we first come in here, there's a whole load of boxes, but actually there's nothing we can really significantly do yet. The only thing we can do is use this button to open, and this would allow me to add in those 3 silver starred rule sets if I needed them. So there's my model revision comparison. That's a useful one. But also because I'm a super duper user, it's a setting in the background. It's stuff that we get into in terms of the admin and management of Solibri and stuff like that. But because I'm set as a super user, I've actually got the option to go and add any other rule set from anywhere else pretty much. So we're not going to get into that just now. We're going to just leave it as these 3 rule sets. So that's one button that's available. The only other button is actually this check model or check selected. And check selected is something you'd probably do when you're first setting up rules and checking bits of the model, doing a partial check, that sort of stuff. But for now, we want to just check the model. So when I do that, it straight away tells me, because this is a new file, I've not done anything with it really. I've just opened it from the last time I saved it. What it's telling me is that I have to verify the classification. And when we see this, it's usually a bit of panic and what does it mean? Cancel, get away from it. But actually what you should do is click on that link. That then opens up the description of the classification, which will then explain, hopefully, if it's well written, what the classification is supposed to do. And then actually all we need to do is go and open the classification settings. And what we're doing is verifying that there's content in this window. What we don't want to see is anything that's unclassified, because if it's unclassified, chances are somewhere in here there's going to be a rule that's looking for components in this classification. If they're not classified, they're not going to be picked up, they're not going to be checked, and you're not going to find out about them, potentially. So that's the whole classifications things we actually covered 2 weeks ago in the last session, so it's worth having a look at the YouTube playlist if you want to go over any of that sort of stuff in there. But for now, this has classified components, it doesn't have unclassified components, so I'm quite happy. So when I OK, the next time I go to check, let's change the display because I went into the classification so I can show all. But the next time I do check, that task doesn't appear because I've effectively cleared it. The other thing that is now too late to explain because it's done it, but one of the things Solibri does there, I don't know if you noticed, but there was 3 bars all appeared at the same time and started to process, because Solibri for some time now will make use of spare threads within the processor of your machine. So depending on what spec your machine is, this one's an i9 with 64 gig RAM, so it has tons of free resource, even with Windows and Mac OS ticking over. And Solibri will make use of that spare resource and it will process the rule sets simultaneously. So you don't have to wait. In the old days, it would start one, it would start it, it would run it, it would finish it, it would stop it, then it would move to the next one and it would repeat, start, process, stop, and it took longer. So now it's quicker to do that. I suppose really the first thing we should then talk about is, and I'm the world's worst for breaking my own rule here, but we talk about rules and we talk about rule sets, and the terms are quite often interchanged or they're mixed up and it's not clear what's what. But actually there is a real clear distinction. A rule set is what we're looking at here. So BIM validation architectural is one rule set. if I start to expand that downwards, it then has subfolders, and within those subfolders, you might have to drill down a few levels, but within those subfolders, eventually you get to this thing here, which is a rule. So these are the rules that we actually talk about. In the background, in the rule set manager, there are also rule templates, which are what are used in the background to generate these rules and customize them into our own requirements. But that's the distinction. So rule sets and rules. But let's go back a step and just start with the very basics of what is actually on screen right now. So we have the checking view, and this shows what rule sets are loaded, what's been processed, and then the results of them. I'll come back onto them in a little second. We then have the results summary, which is a little bit of a scorecard to tell us how many issues we have within each category, how many passes, how many fails. Again, I'll come back to that. Then we have the results, which is where we go and actually work out what these triangles are telling us and try and understand what the issue is. And then at the bottom, we've got info that will tell us more information about the components and about the things that have been checked, etc., etc. So let's go back to the top. I've selected BIM Validation Architectural, and in my results summary, it shows that I've got 46, 19, and 4. And what you can do is pick on any one of these. So those visually are my 46 severe issues within BIM Validation Architectural. Now we can spin around, we can pick on them, we can still report, we can look at the info, we can see what the components are, do all the usual things, sections, dimension, annotate, whatever we want to do. But then I can pick on another one. So there's the moderates, and then there's the low severity issues. The number underneath is the number of issues per 1,000 cubic meters, which really as a unit doesn't mean much. But in general terms, all of these numbers, they're given as a start point. So at the very start of this project, these were the number of severe issues within this particular rule set. Over time, what we expect to see is these numbers decrease because we want to fix more things. So there's less errors in the model and less cost pushed on if things were to get to site and try and be fixed there or whatever. So this has given us a start point. We can report and we can generate an Excel report to show more of a detailed analysis of what's actually been done within this rule set. So this will list the rule set and all the subfolders with their own individual rules, gives all the details, the descriptions, and then it gives all things like the number of issues, the number of, I'm trying to turn my head sideways here, rejected issues, accepted issues, critical issues. It just explains in more details numerically what's been passed, what's been failed, how many components have been checked, and it's just a way of getting a sort of scorecard. This sort of information can be taken out, tailored, and pushed into something like Power BI if you want to do further analysis on it and that sort of stuff. There is also a further report can be generated from the top here, and this is more of an overview report. And what this does is, I've just saved it in the wrong place. Ouch. Why not just open it in Acrobat? That'll do. There we go. And if we set that to just a page, so this just gives us more of a tabular format, and then it'll go into a little bit more detail further down here, listing out all the items and everything else. But we've not actually done anything to, sorry, cancel that. We've not done anything to record any of these issues yet, so there's not a lot of detail. It's very much text-based at this stage. So let's switch back. And of course, that was just looking at BIM Validation Architectural, but we can actually grab all the rule sets, and you'll see there's now 49 severe issues, 41 moderate, and 8 low severity issues. There's also one issue there which has a cross on it, so that means that it is a severe issue, but whatever the detail within it, it's severe enough that it's been set to an outright fail. So there's the decision's taken away from us in effect. The rule's been written in such a way that it says if the failure is more than X number of percentage or whatever it is, the decision's made that this is a rejected issue. So we'll go into that in a second. So let's go back to the beginning, and we need to do something with these various rules and these results that we've got here and the different triangles and everything else. If I just go into the first folder called Model Structure Check, all of these rule sets are taken from our examples, and this particular model structure check checks all the key things that really every model, every IFC model that comes into Solibri should be checked for. So it's things like making sure the model hierarchy is correct. So when I pick model hierarchy, I can already see it's okay, but if we look at the results, it tells me it's passed, but the information then tells me this rule checks the model includes a building and floors. It also checks all components are contained by a floor. So really it's checking the absolute bare bones structural elements of the IFC model, because if it doesn't have the correct structure, nothing to do with components but the structure of the file itself, then you can't necessarily rely on what comes after that. So for any of these, particularly things like unique GUIDs, GUIDs are the things that uniquely identify all the components in the model. So that window there, for example, if we go scrolling down here, has that GUID. That makes it unique from that window, which has different GUIDs, which is different from that one, because we need to be able to say, if we have an issue with this window, we need to be able to pinpoint that issue across all the different systems where this file might be opened. So that means it can be pushed back to, in this case, ArchiCAD to fix any particular issues with that item. So if these are not okay, then we have a bigger problem. Some of the items here, we have a little dash. That just means that in this case, because it's an old model, it's missing some of the components required for those checks. So it's not possible to evaluate them, which is why we get the dash. In terms of the rest of the items, we have all these triangles. It can be a little bit tricky to sometimes see the detail, and you might get a bit overwhelmed if you get too many of them to look at. So what you can actually do is come up here and you can switch off the different levels. So you'll see the number of folders have reduced, so it appears like you've got less work to do. Personally, I like to just have them all switched on, start at the top of the list and work my way to the bottom. But as I like to say, I don't do any real work, so it doesn't matter where I start with it because I'll never finish it. So let's move on from there. Oh, the boss is on the line. I hope he heard that. So let's move on from there while I've still got a job. So going into this very first item, I've started at the top. All I'm doing is working my way down the folders to get to the first rule, which is just called wall height, and it has a low severity issue. I've got the whole model visible on screen, so I need to do a bit more. So what we do is we come down here to results, and it shows that the issue's on the ground floor. As soon as I click that folder, that then isolates the components related to that particular issue. And if I expand these down, I can see that the issue is with a wall type IW530, so I know that's an internal wall, and it has a wrong property value, height of 310. So that doesn't give me the whole story, but if we come to info, what it's telling me is the height is 310, but it should be greater than or equal to 500. So this particular rule is set in such a way that all the walls have to be more than 500 millimeters high. We can, if you are into writing your own rules and everything else, you can right click and you can look at the rule parameters behind this particular rule and you can go and see what is actually happening there, but that's something that we can go into in more detail if it's needed later. But right now we have to process this. So there we have a little piece of wall. We've got a footprint underneath it. The footprint's generated from the IFC. It shows the outline of the walls. It shows, in my case, the name of the space, the number of the space, so the room number effectively, and also the area of the space. That's an extra field that I've switched on with it. We can actually take the footprints and we can extend them upwards. So if I want to see what's going on above here, this is now showing two levels of footprints, so the one immediately below and the one immediately above, so I can work out where this sits. So it's sitting somewhere down there. So it's still not very clear what's actually happening here. So what I can do now is if I right click, always do it at the level of this warning triangle, but right click and go to highlight, paints it red. That's not what I meant to do. What I meant to do was right click and go to section box, because the section box then offsets around the component and gives us some context. So with that in place, what I can then do is actually just move some of these planes. So there I've got the wall behind what I was looking at. And if we go underneath, we can take this bottom one and we can extend this downwards and we can see into the room, we can see the thing we're looking at. If we cut this backwards, I'm going to press T to turn off the sections, and then we can present this quite nicely in the middle of the screen. And now if I do my right click and highlight, now we can see the red wall that we're actually talking about. So actually getting in there, understanding it, visualizing it, working out what's going on, what we can see is that it's not a piece of wall at 310 mil, it's actually a little 30 mil piece of plasterboard that effectively gives us a downstand between two different levels of ceiling, and it's hiding all sorts of ventilation systems. So what I'm going to do with this is I could right click and just say it's accepted because it's not actually a problem. But what I'd probably do, because we live in a where there's a blame, there's a claim culture society, what we can do is record the fact that we're accepting this by adding a slide. So we go in there, and then what I'll do is I like to be really obvious. Red wall. We can make it clear what we're talking about. When it comes to adding the description, this goes back to that first setting that I changed within settings in the checking settings. We turned on all the options. That means I can just press that button and I'm finished. So we automatically populate I can't remember what the 5 fields were now, but it's given us the rule name, it's given us the description. So there'll be the rule description, the components that are involved, what the actual problem is, the height is incorrect, and then it gives us a full description that says it's 310, it should be more than 500. So you can reword that, you can add to it, whatever you like, but effectively all I'm going to do now is just say, well, this is actually acceptable, and I can then say it's closed, and that's it. Really, in effect, it's been dealt with. We can tag responsibilities. This leads on to what we'll need to cover in another session, which is how we actually go forwards with things, but I might just stick my own name on it just so that it's recorded that it's me that did it. We go down a little bit further. We've got the image, shows what the item is. If that's not quite clear enough, we can come in closer. We can spin that around. There's a little cheats method that we can use. If red is used around or near what we're looking at, then one of the little cheats that we can use is go to info, and we can pick on the component because info highlights things in green. I can then add another slide. And if we just extend this so we can see everything at the same time, I could use my markup tools and put things around it and point arrows and all sorts of other bits and pieces, but what I'll do this time is say green wall this time. So I've added an extra comment, and what that does is any time that I pick that comment where it says green wall, it actually takes me to that particular it's not going to do it yet because I've not come out here. But if I close this down, you'll see later how we're able to get back to that sort of stuff. What that's done now is it's put a tick in here because I've accepted that issue. That also makes the triangle white because I've processed it. And really, it's now time to move on to the next one. So the next one, it's a repeat of the process. We pick the rule, we then go to the results, we drop down to where the result is. So there's the wall, and we go read the description that says the wall length should be more than 200, but it's 142. So we can see exactly what it is that we're looking at. Clearly, that makes perfect sense to me what we're looking at, but it might be better for others if we were to do something like that. Right click, highlight, and then visually we can actually see what it is. And if we want to make it really clear, then we go to the markup tool, grab an arrow, and just point at the thing that we're talking about. Again, I'm going to come back here, right click, add a slide. It's automatically put in the description, the title. Call it red wall, we'll stick in the description. This time we'll leave it as rejected because we might have to query just exactly why it's like that. We'll add in arc for architectural, and we'll probably add in structural. These are little tags we can then use to filter some of the results so we can push things to appropriate people. But that's pretty much it. I could also zoom in, spin that around a little bit, get that nicely centered in the middle of the screen, and we can add that as another image. So now I've got two different ways to visualize that same problem. And really that is the process. We just repeat that again and again for as many issues as you have, because realistically what we need to do is go through and convert all of these issues and add slides to them or mark them as accepted or rejected or whatever we're going to do with them, because we need to process them in some way. So if I pick another couple of examples, I'm trying to remember which ones. There we go, clearance in front of windows. This is a good one. We have a number of different ways we can actually filter the results. And right now, for what we're looking at, this is probably the best method, but we actually have these two little buttons here. So right now, this is based on the category. So all of the issues are grouped according to columns being too close to the window component in this case. But we can actually make it a flat list, which then gives us way much more work. So in this case, doing it by category is quite useful, because what we can do is we can see in here we've got all of these issues. So visually, this is what we're looking at. And these ones, you need to kind of understand the model and the history of the model, I suppose, to understand what this is telling us here. But if we were to drop down through these, eventually when we get to a warning triangle, it's going to tell us some of the detail of what's actually going on here. But in effect, what it is we have 29 repeats of exactly the same issue where columns are too close to the window. But in actual fact, this model, because it's an old model, it's the same one we use again and again, because we need to be able to use things like this and predict and show what it's going to do. But in effect, in more modern versions of ArchiCAD, the curtain wall tool would have been used, and you wouldn't have 29 issues. You might have issues because the columns are too close to the curtain wall, but this is mainly happening because these are windows. They are in fact fixed windows, so the columns being that close doesn't make any difference. So what we can do here is just add a slide at this top level. We stick in a description, we say it's accepted, and we tag ourselves, and that pretty much is it. We then close it and move on to the next one. And as I say, really from that point, it is just a repetition. So I'll just pick out another couple of examples, because when we come on to look at how we process the next stage, there's a couple in here that's worth pointing out, and then I'll hand back to Isaac. So I'm talking and not being able to find what I'm looking for. There we go. So this one here, components don't touch. We have a bit of an issue. So I'm not trained as an architect or a structural engineer or any of these sort of things. So with my limited knowledge, I know that the columns are supposed to touch the roof, because that's what they're holding up. So what this is telling me is that we have 9 columns that are 450 mils short of the roof, which I suppose a couple of cans of expander foam that'll do the job. But this is something we need to report. So we're going to add a slide, and we'll change the title here. Columns are 450 millimeters short of the roof. Roof. Give it the description. We'll stick on architectural, structural, and clearly Mickey Mouse was involved in the decision making at that part of the process. We'll stick Mickey on there as well. And that's it. As I said earlier, there's no OK and cancel button. So once you've added a slide, it's done, it's committed. If you need to get rid of it, you'll see it appears in this little column here. You can right click and you can remove it. Or if you want to open it, you can show it, and that'll take you back in if you need to make changes or amendments to it later. But that pretty much is it. There's one other example I wanted to show, which is this one here, which is the wall intersections. So this is our good old general intersection rule, which was the first rule written in Solibri. I had a first rule template. There I've gone and broken my own rule. But the rule template, general intersection rule, allows us to identify not just clashes. It can identify intersections which are clashes, but can identify components inside components, and it can also identify duplicate components. So here what it's actually identified is the fact that we have this wall is contained completely inside this one. So that shouldn't be happening. So this is definitely something that we're going to have to deal with. It also tells me down here the depth, width, height, volume, blah, 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 blah. But what it's saying is that there's an extra 1.61 cubic meters of stuff in that wall that shouldn't be there. So that's going to throw quantities off. It actually flags up within the information takeoff if we were to go and do anything with that, as we covered 2 sessions ago. So again, another plug for the recording, but it's something that needs to be fixed. So I'm just going to do a quick reset of that and then come back to here. So it just resets everything here. And then another little cheat that I'm going to use this time is the select tool, because with the select tool, I can do a little area select like that to pick up the wall within the wall. And then I'm just really going to shuffle this until I get something that makes it really obvious that we've got some odd behavior going on. So I'm looking for big zigzags or anything at all, something like that. That'll do the job. Right click, add a slide, give it a description. It's rejected. We'll stick on structural and architectural again, and we'll close it and move on. So that pretty much is the process of what we actually cover in here. Sorry, I did miss one bit of it there. So if I go in here to this little table, this report tells me for this particular rule, these are the components that have been checked, these are the type of walls that have been checked, the total volume of them, and then the intersection volume. So that's where the 1.61 cubic meters comes from. And if I go to the little spanner, the settings behind it, without going into all the parameters and everything else, there are severity parameters. Those can also be used to push things to be a pass or a fail. In this case, I believe because the volume, the intersection volume, is more than 1% of the total volume, that's what's caused it to fail. Below that, it will still flag and it will still be a failure, but it won't push it to a fail. It will leave it as undefined for you to go and define it later. But the rules can be configured in various different ways to accommodate those scenarios if needed. But that pretty much is a run through of the checking process. So I'll hand back to Isaac, and we've got sort of 5-7 minutes or so to cover any questions.
Thanks, Ken. Yeah, we've got a few questions, so let's get through some of these if you don't mind. If we keep your screen shared, then if any of these questions need just showcasing what's on screen, then that would make it easier, wouldn't it? So the first question, how Solibri categorizes or defines the issues into severe, medium, or low?
Yes, it does. So it all depends on the rule itself. Some of the rules it's just built in, and it will use a sort of scaling factor. So if keeping it very, very vague and very general, if you have something like a distance check between two different components, if you are more than double the distance, double the minimum distance, then it will be a severe issue. Anything up to, well, double will be moderate, and anything less than 10% will be low severity, something like that. Or what we can do is we can actually write in some of the rules, not all of them, but in some of the rules we can write in our own severity parameters that say something like, if you have a door that's blocked by a structural column, that's pretty severe. If you have a door that's blocked by a plant pot, then that's low severity. But that's all about being able to identify these different components. You'll be using classifications or other methods to actually identify what they are. So there's a couple of different ways it can be done. Some of it's automatic, some of it is manually defined.
Yeah, cool. Okay. I'll read this one for you. So bear with me. Is it possible to add other clashes to a specific element if you're reporting the first clash of this element? For instance, a column has a clash with a wall. However, in another rule, it also has a clash with a roof. Can you add this to one presentation slide?
Yeah, yes. I'm trying to think if I've got an example that I can actually show. One of the things we have, there's not really time to get into it here, but we actually have an option in here that we can filter in different ways. So we can create, we can use the selection basket to filter some of the content that's actually displayed on the screen. But the other thing we can do is, I need to find a component. If I just take one of these columns, for example, we know there's an issue with it, then what you can actually do is, if I pick that issue, wrong tool, if I pick that issue with the info tool, then in here we can see an issues tab, and that now shows everywhere that column is related to some other sort of issue, and we can search the results from the same item, which it's already done it. It's gone back to here. So yes, there's a way to do it, but I would need to set up an example to include all of that sort of stuff in there. The other thing we can do is depending on how we write the rules, we write them in different ways at different times. So if we were just to clash everything against everything, there would be so much that it would be impossible to actually get in and read the details. But if we were to then break it down in a similar way to what's been done here, not necessarily to this level of detail, but we've got walls to walls, slabs to slabs, roofs to roofs. But if we were to do walls to MEP or whatever it happens to be, when it comes to MEP, we can actually organise by systems as well. So we're able to group. So it's not just one item. We're able to group issues together. So we're not having to deal with lots and lots of separate things. So I don't know if that's answered the question, but the short answer is yes, we can do it, but we'd need to get into more detail on how we actually set it up. It's not something I can easily show in this model.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, we're happy to follow up with anybody as well that might want to get a little bit more specific about some of these things. Then just get in touch. We're happy to carry on the conversation offline.
Cool.
A couple of other questions, Ken, here for you. Since I'm the one asking them, be the one to answer them. Thank you. Can you report issues out into BIM Collab?
Yeah, I mean, that's the next stage of what we've got to do here. Is it's two different workflows we can use. We can go offline reporting, which will report out to sort of, I call them dead end formats. They come out to a PDF or an Excel sheet, which doesn't necessarily go anywhere else. We can go out to a manually generated BCF file, which is BIM collaboration format, which can then push into various different authoring tools, or we can go with the whole online method, which is pushing out to or with our BCF Live connector, which allows you to then connect to what's the five? BIMTrack, BIMSync, BIMCollab, AConnect, Trimble Connect, and StreamBIM, I think, is the other one. It's a new server that came online fairly recently. So yes, there's a few different ways that we can do that stuff.
Perfect.
Okay.
Another question for you here, Ken. Can you show the filtering of issues once added, i.e. architectural, structural, Ken, etc.?
Ken, yeah, I don't want to see anything. I've got Ken on it. That is the stuff that we'll cover in the next session. That's part of the offline side of things. So once we've created a presentation in here, that would then be used within the which one is it? Can't remember. Was it responsibility? It's not been done yet because there's a few steps to go through. But in here, we can then filter based on those results. And then once we've got a selection of the results, we can mark them. And with them marked, we can actually filter them so that only the structural or only the architectural or only the ones that I don't want to hear my own name on, but those ones would then appear. So, but there's a few steps to go through to get to that part. So we will cover that in the next session.
Yeah, definitely. And it's all about how you build the presentations as well, isn't it? Because you could build them off the back of certain rule sets that could be tailored to the certain disciplines as well.
Yeah, potentially.
Yeah. So lots of ways of doing things, and we'll get into those next session. But I'll just switch my screen back over to myself, Ken, if you don't mind.
Cool.
You might need to stop sharing in order for me to take that back.
I'll change to. It's because you're not Isaac, you're Solibri, that's why. There you go.
I always do myself. Okay, so talking about the next session, basically, part 2 is just a continuation of this workflow with you. How we report on these identified issues is going to be the real crux of that discussion. So Look out for that one. That happens in 2 weeks' time from today. Same time, 2 o'clock. Everybody should hopefully have that in their calendars already. But let us know if you don't, and we can get you the link over. But it should be there. Again, same principle as before. Q&A session, and all these sessions are being recorded as well, so you can share them with colleagues and go back over them. The other things, obviously, just to go back to that previous slide of what else are we looking to cover off in future sessions. The one after the one in 2 weeks' time, in a month's time, is going to be tailored to Kobe. So look out for that one too. And we're not, as I said, we're not going to lose sight of some of this other stuff. So when it comes down to model revision comparisons or federating of models, for example, then it will be catered for. It's just a matter of when, not if.
I think the other thing with that is some of those might actually merge, so it might not just be one session on one of those. So there might be a bit of shuffling of the content just to fit everything in.
Yeah, cool, perfect. So I believe I put the wrong date in the next slide. I think I've just noticed that now. And in fact, it's not the wrong date. It's a date from ages ago. I didn't notice to update. It is actually the 17th of June. That is the next session, if I'm not mistaken, Ken.
Yeah,
which is it?
It is the 17th. You've missed a week.
I have. So yeah, don't mind me and my admin part there. It's the 17th of June. June. So look out for that one. And then again, just a reminder that the classroom courses are coming up in July and August as well, if you want to get into more detail on this stuff. So thanks everyone for joining us today. If anybody's got any further questions, then please do feel free to get in touch with us. Sales-UK will come straight through to me, so I'll get back to you pretty much as soon as I see your email, which is normally straight away. Thanks for joining us, and we'll hopefully see you again in 2 weeks' time.